You are watching the UN's largest virtual conference ever. It is the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit 2020. More than 15,000 people have registered for this. If you're watching, you're one of them. Thank you so much for watching. What is the idea? We have a health crisis. We have an inequality crisis. We have a climate crisis. What can business do uniting with the United Nations, going on track with these SDGs and helping to make our world better, even though there is a global pandemic right now? Now, you may be thinking, this is not the time. I mean, our economies aren't even in good shape. How can we be thinking about a global platform for development? Well, we have an answer for you. That answer is the SDG Ambition initiative. And here to tell you more, to tell us more, Lisa Kingo, the CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, and also Julie Sweet, CEO of Accenture. Over to you, ladies.
Femi, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture today, and one of our main partners together with SAP in this amazing, exciting SDG ambition that we will talk about in the session now. Before we listen to Julie, let me just give you a little bit of a background for why we invented the SDG ambition. So at the UN in September last year, a major stock-taking exercise happened on what is the state of the world on the global goals. And no surprise, the result was that even though we see progress in some areas, we are far, far behind, particularly on climate change and on social inequalities. So all the good work that businesses, many other stakeholders across the world have been doing, it has not really made the needle move behind each of the global goals. So in January, Davos, the UN Global Compact, Accenture, and SAP launched a new SDG ambition with the UN Secretary General. And it's this SDG ambition that we want to share with everyone today in more detail, because clearly we need a strong global initiative now that can do two things: accelerate companies' ambition in how to meet the goals, but also make sure that companies really embed and integrate goals and values into the heart of the way they run their business. And that's what Julie and I want to explore within the next 15 minutes. So Julie, I want to hear your perspective on, since you and I were together in Davos launching the SDG ambition in January, what has been your impression of the challenges in the world? Where are we after COVID-19? And how do you see the whole issue of recovering stronger where we are today? What's the recipe for doing that in your perspective?
Thank you, and thanks for that introduction earlier. This is a really important time, and it's an important time for us to be getting together to have this conversation. So let me first just take a step back before I kind of get to the specific question, just to frame a little bit about what we're going through, because I think it's relevant to what the potential is as we move forward. So first, just on the crisis itself, obviously there's the completely unusual that we have a global pandemic, but when we look at the crisis and we talk to CEOs from a corporate perspective, there are really two things that stand out in the crisis. The first is that this is the largest change of behavior at one time in the history of mankind that we know about. sorry, I shouldn't use mankind, humankind. And therefore, it is changing people's expectations. And then on the other hand, we don't just have a financial crisis, but the financial crisis was coming at a time where we already had an exponential change in technology that was causing us to innovate around business models, but also innovate around solving some of the world's challenges like climate change. So when you think about those two things together, they provide an interesting roadmap as we move to the future, because we're at a time of change of behavior. And so when you think about climate change, there is a behavioral change. It's not simply about supply and having the supply of cleaner energy, but it's also about the demand side, which requires different changes in behavior. When you think about the opportunities for people in terms of providing gender equity, one of the benchmarks in terms of at all layers of leadership, those are cultural and behavioral changes, as well as the goals and the outcomes that we want to set. And so I think we should have a lot of optimism that when you see how fast the world can change, when you clearly articulate a purpose, when there's a lot at stake, and the fact that because of the global pandemic and the health crisis and the opportunities of technology, there's going to be a lot of change. The purpose that we must have is to embed in that change the goals that are so relevant to having what we talked about last in January, that this would be a decade of the potential of realizing the potential of technology, and also a decade of shared success for all. And so that's where I start, and that I think there is a huge opportunity. I'll pause there, and because then I can address some of the other questions. But I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it's interesting, Julie, that we launched the SDG Ambition in January and had no idea that the pandemic would hit us. So now today, when we are launching the 10 benchmarks, that will actually be the goals, the new normal that we would like all companies to adhere to, we have the opportunity to really emphasize the social side of sustainability as well. So, of course, we want one of our goals, SDG ambitions, to be companies setting targets aligned with a 1.5 degree trajectory, so focus on climate. But we also want companies to really put gender equality at the top of any business, top management, at board level. We need gender parity. It has to happen now. And a few benchmarks that we are actually launching today is exactly about having 100% of employees across the organization earning a living wage, which was what Philip Jennings was addressing very much in the previous session. So we hope that we will provide help and guidance for companies in saying, look, here are 10 areas where we need to set a new normal. Otherwise, we will never upgrade the business models and the social contract that is clearly not working today. So, Julie, I was also keen to ask you today, because I know you engage with so many CEOs. How do you see CEOs today trying to run their business in a new way, aligning to the new normal that are clearly emerging?
Thanks. It's a good question. So first of all, I like to use the word balance, because sometimes I think people are worried that there's a trade-off, that either you can, meet goals for gender equality, or you can achieve your business objectives, or you can, the climate fighting climate change is too expensive. When in reality, there isn't a black and white, and that's what you hear a lot from CEOs today. Speed is probably the biggest theme because companies reacted so quickly in the crisis. Many CEOs are saying, I don't want to go back, and I want to be able to move much more quickly in the future. If you think about what hasn't changed, is that, and this is what we talked about back in January, and it underlies the work that we're doing together with SAP and so many great companies, is that to achieve objectives, you have to have a goal, you have to have an execution plan, and ability to measure progress, and accountability. And, as CEOs, we would never set a revenue goal without an execution plan, the data, the ability to measure progress, and then accountability. And that is fundamentally what we're doing today is about in terms of releasing these benchmarks. And you couple that with this view of balance, and you take, for example, gender equity. So at Accenture, back in 2014, we were 36% women and 300,000 people. And we said in order to become a more digital company, we needed diversity to help us more to innovate. And so we had set a goal to be gender equal by 2025. Sitting here today, we're over 500,000 people and 44% women. And we operate at that intersection of technology and professional services. And we've had a growth CAGR of 9%. And why do I share that? We got there because we set a goal, 50-50. We had an execution plan. We measured our progress, and we had accountable leaders. And what I'm so excited about the work that we're doing together here with the UN Global Compact is that by setting these benchmarks, we're helping companies establish the goals. By working on the management tools, we're helping them measure progress. And we're doing that, working together, just as we saw companies and governments and not-for-profits work together over these last few months to address the global pandemic and economic crisis.
Julie, thank you for articulating in such a clear way what the SDG ambition is all about. And I think you are so right in saying it's about becoming more ambitious. It's about setting very clear goals. And we are launching the 10 new goal areas today. And then it's also about ensuring that the internal processes inside the company is geared to really integrate sustainable development goals, 10 principles, right from the purpose of the company to governance, to the corporate strategy, through operations and into stakeholder relations. So I want to say, if anybody is watching our summit today and thinking that it's quite a tall challenge how to make the goals a reality by 2030, this is our proposal. Join the SDG Ambition. Become part of the community of at least more than 1,000 companies that we will enroll together with the UN Global Compact, local networks, with Accenture, with SAP for the next 2 to 3 years. So we really develop critical mass behind accelerating ambition and deepening implementation of what it means to be a responsible company today. And Julie, I want you to have the final word. So it's always a challenge when you want to go out to many businesses. We have a plan to reach more than 1,000 businesses across the world. And clearly we have COVID-19 that digitalization is the key for including more small and medium-sized businesses in the positive globalization. So what's your view on how to do that in the most efficient way?
Well, as you said, I think what's really important is that we have a lot of resources pointed toward helping companies achieve this through our SDG ambition and the work that we're doing with companies. And so I would encourage companies to join and be a part of it. There are going to be a lot of things we can learn from each other, and it doesn't have to be a choice between succeeding economically. In fact, by solving the SDG goals, we do believe that companies will prosper. And so I would encourage there to be a wide participation, and for larger companies to be bringing into the discussions their supply chains of small and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm very confident that together we will find ways to strike that right balance and to make progress faster. So thanks again for letting me share my thoughts and to be a part of this Accenture, for Accenture to be a part of the SDG Ambition and this work. We're really proud to be partnering with you and with SAP and with the many companies who are contributing to this great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julie. And Femi, back to you.
Thank you very much, ladies, Lisa and Julie. So, coming up, we have a panel of business leaders who are setting impressive sustainability goals. But before that, I'm going to talk to you about Paul Polman. I have known Paul for quite a long time, way back, many years ago when he was the CEO of a very well-known multinational company. You can Google it. I'm not going to say it, but it was pretty impressive. What I loved about him when he was on a panel was that he'd come on the panel and he was a businessman, he was an executive, not always the best speakers, he was a phenomenal speaker. And not only did he walk the talk, he ran the talk. It was so impressive. I'm so building him up right now, he better be good. But right now, what is he doing? Well, Paul Polman is the vice chair of the board of the UN Global Compact, and he is going to speak to you right now. Good to see you, Paul.
Well, good to see you, Amy, as well, and thanks for the kind words. You indeed are setting the bar high. And I want to thank Lacy as well and Julie for the work they're doing, and Lacy, obviously, for the leadership over the last 5 years to the UN Global Compact. This summit is very important because it's a leadership moment above anything else. Recovering and building back better is indeed the right theme. We only have about 4,000 days remaining until it's 2030. And I can assure you it goes fast. And unfortunately, we're not on the line that we should be on. The SDG ambitions were launched, as Lisa talked about. I remember launching them with SAP, Accenture, Lacy, and the Secretary General in the WEF this year. And it was extremely well received by the private sector. To help the private sector, the SDGs, the UN Global Compact has also created what is called the business benchmarks. These are very important. 10 simple but very important things to do, ranging from ensuring that we have living wages to gender balance, to 100% sustainable sourcing, staying below the 1.5 degrees, zero bribery, zero waste, and many of the other things. It finally and truly makes the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact come alive. I'm so thrilled about this roadmap that is now given to the CEOs that undoubtedly will jump on it. But above all, as I said, bold leadership is key. Bold target setting in these companies are key. And that requires you to have a certain level of discomfort as you do this. This is not the norm that we need. You know, Dickens died about 150 years ago last week. And Dickens said it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But Dickens also said it was the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness. Foolish we have been, but I hope that this crisis helps restore a certain level of wisdom in all of us, because we need it. The SDGs, or global goals as many people are calling them, are more needed now than ever. Many are asking for a better and faster recovery. COVID, amongst any things, has shown us that we cannot have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. COVID had also shown us the links between nature, between human health, between economy, between climate, and all these things are now better understood. But it has also shown, above all, our social fragility. Once more, like on all the other sustainable development goals, it's the poor that pay the price of our irresponsibilities of not acting. And not only is it the poor who pay the price with higher death rates on COVID, excluded from the much quicker than others, no social networks. We've added, rightfully so, now another dimension with the unfortunate and untimely death of George Floyd, the racial dimension to it. So if people feel, or too many people feel, they're excluded from the global process, or that it's not working for them, it will ultimately rebel. And I guess that is what we are seeing all across the world right now. A new generation of activists is emerging from this deep, widespread anger over injustice, racial issues, climate change, inequality, and yes, the lack of progress on gender. Now we have to channel that anger to muster the courage for some, what is for some might be some uncomfortable changes that are badly needed. We can't simply be silent or impartial if some of these basic human rights or these values that we talk about that are at the core of humanity, if they are violated. It was Martin Luther King who said it very well when he said that our lives begin to end the moment that we become silent about the things that matter. And yes, equality, equity, dignity and respect, inclusion do matter. They are the foundations of our society. We also know that the task we have in front of us is enormous. This is not an easy time to be CEO, and I admire the many CEOs that are rising above the challenge. But sometimes you need to break more things and deal with more challenges to design it right. We have a human crisis, we have an economic or financial crisis, and we also have a governance crisis. That's not easy, that's overwhelming for many. It's shaking many people's lives in many ways. By focusing only on creating what has been, we run the risk that we fail to create what is needed. And here we have an opportunity to create what is needed. But the reality is that we're moving too slow. 700 million people still in extreme poverty. Oxfam saying another 500 million will be added. 257 years before we reach gender equality. Is 3.5 degrees the trajectory we want to be on for climate change? I don't think so. I don't think so. We have an opportunity to redesign and redesign fast. And you know what? 90% of the citizens of this world want it. And it makes a lot of sense. It has a strong economic case, better jobs, better wages, more jobs at the time that we need them. And frankly, more secure jobs, the jobs in industries of the future. We see employees demanding from their companies, sometimes even with walkouts, that they need to act. We see citizens in the street. We see the financial markets move. And yes, we also have some responsible governments like the European Green Deal and some other countries that are embedding it into their strategies, into their regulations, into their laws. Now, companies have also discovered that if they are running their businesses on a multi-stakeholder, longer-term model called ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, they actually are also better in performance. We have seen that the companies that subscribe to the UN Global Compact principles have actually performed better in this turmoil and financially as well for their shareholders. But it's only 45% of companies that really took action by embedding the Sustainable Development Goals into their company strategies. We still have a lot of room, let's be honest. 18% do not only 18% extend the principles into their value chain. Only 15% have signed up to science-based targets. And frankly, only 35% of all those wonderful companies are actively out there advocating the SDGs. That's not enough. We need to step up for the interest of our own businesses to be able to prosper in the long term, and more importantly, for humanity to prosper. Now, the most important thing is not the technologies. Yes, we need them. It's not others, it's actually ourselves, our own leadership. We've never been so forewarned about things that are going to happen, but we've also never been so forearmed with tools to do something about it. As the study shows from Russell Reynolds, what the type of leadership is that is needed are people that are systemic thinkers, people that can work in these multi-stakeholder environments, people that understand the power of disruptive innovation, and yes, people that have long-term focus. But may I say that above all, do we need leaders that understand that putting the interest of others ahead of their own is also to their own benefit. These are leaders with a high degree of humanity, with a high degree of humility. And yes, they're first and foremost good human beings. And the world is crying out for this. This is a human crisis. This is a crisis where we have forgotten that humanity is at the center of all we do and not the numbers, or may I say our share price. Coalitions are forming. Businesses are getting together. Step changes are happening on many fronts. Now is the opportunity to step up, all of us. You know, if I may say, Amy, and I end here, that when we are the happiest in life is actually when what we think, what we say, and what we do is in harmony. And it's now more important than ever that we actually do. Actions speak louder than anything. Now is the time. I thank everybody, and I thank the incredible leaders that are on this panel for all the things they're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And thank you very much to Lise and to Julie for what comes before. I think we will echo in this panel and debate many of the things that you've raised there, and I couldn't agree more given the timeliness of where we are at the moment. I couldn't agree more in terms of echoing your point about anti-racism in light of everything that's going on in the world at the moment, and very, very contemporary. So, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome wherever you are in the world to the first of our two panels over the next 24 hours that will explore raising the SDG ambition to build back better and to recover stronger. Let me tell you a little bit about the event and then introduce what will be a magnificent panel full of experience right around the world on these issues across different industries. In order to reset, rebuild, and create the world we want, we must start by aligning business ambition with the SDG challenges and the opportunities ahead. Today, you are going to hear from leaders why raising the SDG ambition is a business imperative to recovering stronger from the economic and humanitarian shock of COVID-19, which I think has brought into stark contrast how important, how fragile global systems can be when we haven't got fully embedded, responsible, sustainable, resilient sets of principles, as well as how to embed the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact into strategy, into operations, into stakeholder engagement. And perhaps even more importantly, as the practice around sustainable and responsible business evolves and matures, how we integrate sustainability not just into benchmarking, but into measurement, into performance, into being able to communicate better the impact of our organizations, as well as quantify the benefit to society and indeed to shareholders. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There'll be a panel discussion, no set presentations, and I will try and make it as interactive as we can and as we go. So let me introduce this wonderful panel following on from Paul Polman, I think a great pioneer in this space, so a really important and an opportune moment for him to tee this panel up. So I'm joined by Dr. Ilham Kadri, the CEO and chairperson at Solvay, who's been a real champion across a number of companies that she's led on sustainability. She and I spoke earlier in the last year, back in September, in the Global Compact Leader Summit. She talked about the pioneering work that Solvay, as a global chemicals company, is leading in the circular economy. Joined also by Mr. Roberto Marques, the chairman of Natura & Co. I think I said at that same summit that we had during the UN General Assembly Week, Natura, one of my favorite places to visit anywhere in the world. I think the coolest campus just outside Sao Paulo that I've seen, but also a great company trying to pioneer sustainability, not just in its own business, but increasingly in the portfolio of companies that it has acquired and built over recent years. So we'll come to Roberto to discuss that, based in Brazil, but now a very global company. And then finally, on to Emmanuel Chirico, who's known as Manny. So I'll be calling him Manny today in the panel, who's the chairman and CVO of PVH Corp. And that, I think, is a company maybe you do or don't know the overall holding company. You will definitely know the brands that Manny oversees, brands like Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Van Heusen, Speedo, many of the brands that we know and love, and is working to try and drive sustainability into the core of the way PVH works and works with its suppliers and distributors around the world. So I think a great group to focus on this issue. Now, the first part of the panel I want to come to is this raising ambition and setting out bold visions for the future, not just at the macro level, as we've seen with the Global Compact, but at individual company level. And let me come first to you, Ilham. So what are the changes in your company and industry that can raise the ambition and accelerate the delivery of the SDGs? You and I, when we spoke last time, talked about your commitment to circularity, but how do you think about raising the ambition, not just yourselves as a company, but as part of an ecosystem that includes your suppliers and includes your customers?
Yeah, hi Peter, nice to see you again. And first of all, happy anniversary to the UN Global Compact. Well, listen, at Solvay we address the environment, the inequality challenges through simply our purpose, strategy and sustainability roadmap. And as Paul stated, it's time for leaders to lead and have bold targets. We believe as a company that all starts with the why, with our purpose of why we are in business, why we are a company with a history of 157 years and many more. Our purpose is about bonding people, ideas and elements to reinvent progress, with the vision to create sustainable shared value for all through science and innovation. And if coronavirus has taught us something, actually we learned and relearned, is to reinvent progress, because what took us here will not bring us there. So the environmental strategy, what we did, is part of our business strategy. It's not a consequence of it, like the financials are. It's not a top-down approach from the CEO or a corporate language. You put in annual report and you refresh it every year. I believe sustainability and environmental issues, inequalities is about good business with impact on people, planet, and should make good money. It's a holistic approach to sustainability. So we think about it, Peter, as a climate, resources, and better life. Those are three pillars. On the inequalities which you see rising, we need to take care of the most vulnerable. How people who are under stress, hardship, think about the day of tomorrow rather than today. In our company, our response was the Solvay Solidarity Fund. We launched a month ago, and we called on employees, board members to voluntarily contribute. Employees who cannot afford it have donated days off, for example. They were very creative. We called our investors and shareholders to donate part of their dividend to the fund. And all in all, believe it or not, in 5 weeks, we received 15 million euros. Everyone should play their part. I call it responsible capitalism. And finally, on how to can get there together and raise the ambition is through private-public partnership, working on biodiversity, on climate, on resources, but also have a sense of urgency. Look at the COVID-19 immediate threat. It was visible. Climate is a threat, but less visible. The way we manage COVID-19 can also be taken as a path to other challenges such as climate, biodiversity, and rising inequalities.
And Ilham, I really like the point about the sense of urgency. And I've been in a lot of conversations in the last few weeks too, and I've asked a simple question of CEOs. Do you think that the COVID crisis is something that means we're going to have less focus on sustainable and responsible business, or do you see it as an accelerant? How do you see it impacting your business, given the reality it's going to be tough for many industries, many economies around the world?
Well, I think it's going to be rather an accelerator, because COVID-19 has been probably the best wake-up call for building awareness around biodiversity challenges. When you disturb the ecosystem, and migrations of new viruses from animal to human spreading around the world, leading to a crisis of lifetime. So, at Solvay, we did this actually before coronavirus. Nobody saw it coming, and we committed on decreasing, reducing our pressure on biodiversity by 30%, like water eutrophications, less clean, fresh water intake in our operations. So I think, I hope we're going to learn from this COVID-19 crisis, and of course, opening ways to circularity, to better life. It's important in the coming days and years.
Excellent. Thank you, Ilham. I'll come back to this point, I think, in a minute. I think the point you make about it being an accelerant, and Paul talked about a window of opportunity, and I think it's important to think about what we do at the micro level with that. So we'll come back to that. Roberto, Natura has taken a very decisive position around climate change. Last September, you committed to a 1.5 degree science-based net zero target. Now, you've got a really interesting model where obviously you have Natura as a company, but you also have other components in your portfolio of companies. How are you going about helping them, as well as your own business, not just set but achieve targets and make real progress on climate change?
So Peter, first, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So thank you for having me and for this important panel. And again, happy anniversary to the UN Global Compact. Listen, I think just building a little bit what Paul was saying, the moment that we are going through is pretty serious, right? As society, as human beings, this pandemic, with a significant cost in terms of lives and livelihoods. The society now stepping up and really claiming for change, right? And as Natura & Co., which is a global business now with 4 amazing brands, Natura, Avon, Body Shop, and Aesop, we think that this is an opportunity for business leaders, society, government together to really step up and take this as an opportunity to shape the world in a better way coming out of this crisis. I think it is a unique opportunity. In that regard, today, in fact, we are announcing our 2030 sustainability vision with clear commitments for the next 10 years, Peter, in terms of what we are going to hold ourselves accountable. And what are the things that we believe are going to be important also to work with society, to work with governments and other companies to be able to achieve. We don't think we're going to be able to do it alone. In fact, we are inviting other companies, leaders, society to join this, and Global Compact is a great tool for that. But we are really trying to be bold. Again, one example that you mentioned about the climate crisis, we are committing ourselves to become net zero in 2030, which is 20 years ahead of our commitment that we did just last year, and you were part of that. But we think that the time is now. I think the time is now, and we absolutely need to do our part here. At the same time, as you know, Peter, we think Amazon is such a critical component of our ecosystem, not only because we are in Brazil, in Latin America, but the impact, at a global level. So we commit ourselves that we're not going to rest until we have zero deforestation in Amazon. We've been working the Amazon for over 20 years. We know that it's possible to preserve the forest and drive sustainable growth for the communities there and economic growth for them. But we needed to take a very important, step here. And the other 2 pillars, just to finalize, that we are announcing today, one is really about gender equality, as you know, very important, and also increasing inclusion of underrepresented groups in our business with very specific targets. And last but not least, and we heard already in this panel, the importance of circularity, right? So we are committing to a full circularity of our packaging, and at the same time, almost 90% renewable natural ingredients and 90% biodegradable formulas across our entire group. All the brands are committing to that. And we're going to need to work also in finding innovative regenerative solutions. We think that it's very important to figure out how we put back more into nature than what we take away. So we're excited about it, but we're also humble by the moment that the world is going through and what's our role and how we can actually partner with other companies and society, academia, to really find the right solutions for a better, greener world coming out of this pandemic.
And Roberto, just as a follow-up question, I mean, clearly you mentioned issues like the Amazon, the COVID crisis, which has hit Brazil hard, although you've got operations all over the world. I mean, one of the interesting things I think to learn from leaders is what are the really tough trade-offs and decisions as a board that you have to make? I mean, so there must be a cost implied in accelerating from 2050 to 2030 and other dilemmas and trade-offs. Could you just give us an example of one or two tough decisions that you've chosen to make as a board on this topic?
I mean, I think the trade-offs are actually not that hard. I have to say that. At least, we think that there is actually not another option. We can run a business in a dead planet. We can run a business if we are facing with this level of, society calling out for change and, risks of other pandemics and things like that. So we see that, of course, there is investments to be made. But we think that number one, companies and, maybe you're fortunate to work in a group and a board that understands that, there is no other way, Peter. I mean, I'm afraid to say that there are a lot of companies when they struggle about those trade-offs. I mean, one thing that I will say that is challenging, and it is something that we need help, is make sure that we can track and measure this, and some of those measures are tough. As you know, we're the first public traded company B Corp certified. We certified the Body Shop as a B Corp last year. We're working out toward Avon and ESOP to be a B Corp. But measuring some of those things, as you talk about a net zero carbon emission, I mean, how we make sure that we have the right instruments, measures in place, so it becomes as easy as reporting our EBITDA number or our market share growth. We've got to make sure that this is so ingrained in the way we run the business that I believe will help the business embrace this in a more consistent way.
Roberto, that's a brilliant tee up, so thank you, because I think the whole purpose of the SDG Ambition program in the second phase is, as you rightly say, to make it easier for businesses to measure, to manage, to communicate, to quantify in smart ways, exactly as you say, so that you have a financial ledger, but also a sustainability ledger that you can use for that purpose. So that's very helpful. Let me move on to Manny at PVA. Manny, fashion is an industry where sustainability holds lots of promise, plenty of challenges. Now, you have been very committed as part of Fashion Forward in your mission to raise ambition on things like reducing negative impacts to zero, increasing positive impacts to 100 is the terminology I think you use, on a range of issues from climate and energy to water to waste. How are you working not just as an individual company, but as a leader in the industry to ensure that efforts are collaborative as well as competitive?
That's a great point, Peter. I think when you think about this issue, one of the challenges is you need to change mindset a little bit. We are, as you can imagine, like most of people on the other executives on this panel, unbelievably competitive, looking to raise market share and drive business. But there's a point where, and our goal always is, we like to say, is to step on our competitors' throats. But there's a way to do that, to stay competitive, but be collaborative when it comes to setting opportunities and goals. And I think you could be strategic as an industry, level the playing field, and think about the relationships you have with suppliers, that enable transparency, transparency about materials and inputs, how we expand our capabilities to deliver better sustainable products for our consumers, embracing digitalization and the sustainable innovation that it unlocks, from 3D design and printing and virtual showrooms to using data to help us reduce waste through more timely and accurate information that gives us a better level playing field. The work we signed on to with the International Labor Organization to protect garment workers, that's more than just one company can do. It's really, it's the industry working with the entire supply chain with a commitment to work together as brands, governments, representatives of labor, and then those employers that are actually doing the production in the factories, to create a more resilient, a more just supply chain that's better equipped to deal with both the human and issues we have to deal with and the business impacts that come with COVID-19 or any future crisis that we may come up with. So I think that's a way we can really work together as an industry. The other thing I always try to encourage is transparency and holding yourselves accountable for targets. We do it every day when it comes to our financial results. We put out there earnings targets, we put out there cash flow targets. But if you think about some of these other targets about the business, by being transparent, by having ambitious goals, I think Paul talked about, you need to be uncomfortable with some of the goals you set. It can't be easy layups. It needs to be really a drive for something that you could really achieve, but at the same time you know is going to be a stretch. And if you come up a little bit short, as long as you're moving the ball down the field and making a positive impact, I think that's showing that the company is moving in the right direction. So I think we need to be bold when we go to set these initiatives, and then we need to hold ourselves accountable as a company and as an industry to deliver against it.
Manny,
I'm sorry, Peter, you're breaking up.
Sorry, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just saying, Manny, I'm checking my phone for some of the questions that are coming in for us as we've been talking, and maybe I'll put this one to you as we go. So one of the comments that was made is that, and you talked about COVID, I think all of us have talked about COVID at one level, that asking the existential question around business models and whether or not 2019's business models will survive 2020, given the kind of year that we've had. I'm not necessarily asking you to comment on whether or not it's an existential crisis, but I am interested in what do you think does change the business model as a result of some of the sustainability trends we're seeing and some of them that have been accentuated during the COVID crisis. How do you see things impacting maybe for the longer term, not just for the short-term recovery in your industry?
Sure. Look, I think if you think about what the COVID pandemic has done to the retail and apparel fashion industry, it's been an industry that's been going through tremendous change with the digitization of the industry, moving from brick and mortar retail to online retail. I think what this has really done is accelerated what was in front of us. I think consumers are demanding more from a business perspective, but they're also demanding more from brands and companies. They're demanding that we are responsive to and they want to be associated with brands that are contributing to the improvement of the environment, that are holding themselves accountable for the impacts that they're having on the environment and are making corrections for that. They're looking at brands from the point of view of inclusion and diversity. What are you doing? So I think the consumer is demanding more than anything else how we move forward. And I think it's forcing us all to take our targets and what we were trying to do and accelerating those goals forward to create a more inclusive work environment and to be more sustainable in our supply chain.
Thank you, Manny. I think that's an excellent response. And maybe I'll just, on that question, to keep it interactive, let's go to Ilham. So on that context of what do you think COVID may have by way of long-term implications for sustainability? What are some of the trends for chemicals in your industry? And then I'll come to you, Roberto, as well on that same question.
Well, I think for the chemical industry, Peter, we realized that chemistry is important, is essential, believe it or not. None of our plants have been closed by any authority in the world but China because of the extension of the Chinese New Year, because we produce essential things for food, feed, healthcare, water purification, vaccines, and ventilators, right? So people just rediscovered the invisible chemistry, or the mother of all industries, right? And I think that's important. And I think we talked about the climate. I think it's important we can have the ambition for neutrality by 2050. And I think people now need to start acting now. You have to make it happen now, right? This is why we committed as a company to speed up the greenhouse gas emission cuts by 2030 and double our efforts. We announced as well that we are exiting coal with our suppliers and our customers. This is our historical energy used since the inception of the company 157 years ago, and use energy, other energies like windmills, biogas, biomass, batteries, or solar. We are the #2 solar farmer in South Carolina state in the US, and supplying major electronic and smart devices, because our clients now, they want to become circular. They want cleaner energy and mobility. On circularity, I think it is becoming viral, and it's a positive virus this time, because people realize that waste can be a resource. I grown up in a culture of you don't have the luxury to waste. I believe we are the very last generation who have the luxury to make a choice. And if you think about lithium-ion EV batteries, I give you an example. Recycling. We are working with an automotive and a waste recovery company to extract the metal from the battery at its end life. And bring it back into the system, right? Collecting it, dismantling it, and back to the extraction. So you need an ecosystem, right? And we are partnering with Ellen MacArthur Foundation to really continue doing that. And I think it was discussed, and it's close to my heart, as you know, the inclusion and diversity. And I think we need there, I don't think it's, when we say it needs to happen now, I think it's a bit of a dream. I think we need a pipeline of diverse future leaders, experts, STEM employees, and we need to support them right now to acquire global experiences, help them during critical moments of their lives, such as welcoming a newborn or adopting kids, to really continue their career. We offer to the mothers and co-parents, regardless of the gender now, who work at our company, 16 weeks of parental leave to support each other's. And the final one, I think all of us, and it was mentioned by the panelists, the sustainability target needs to have a weight in the performance evaluation of the CEO, the managers of the company. In our company, the short-term incentive include 10% for the Solvay One Planet for our 4,500 managerial employees, 20% for the long-term incentive for our top 400, and for those who are not benefiting from variable remuneration, our response is what we call the global profit sharing, which is also impacting the blue collars, for example, pockets, and which is also linked to our Solvay One Planet.
Thank you, Ilham. I think that's really, really concrete in terms of integrating that into the HR mix. The recruitment, retention, rewards, assessments of people, and even to your point, I've had that conversation a few times. We've been through a number of crises in the last 20 years, in all of our careers, 20, 30 years. The question is, how do we create global experience and resilience at the leadership level to be prepared for future crises? I think that is and also how to deliver this journey. So I think that's a fascinating topic. Roberto, let me come to you with that same question. So obviously for for beauty and for cosmetics? How is it impacting the industry? And there's another question in here for you, which is also how are you thinking in the COVID era and how it's going to change the business model, but how are you engaging with consumers and the end user on these topics?
Yeah. So again, I had the benefit of listening my two colleagues on the panel to reflect and agreeing with everything they said, but I had a little bit of time to think about it, so it was good. So I actually would divide my answer in two, if I may, Peter. One aspect is called the business aspect, right? And here, of course, we are seeing increase in demand for personal care items, hygiene products. People are much more aware of taking care of themselves, and we are seeing that. Of course, we are seeing tremendous growth in e-commerce and social selling, especially in our network, over 6 million entrepreneurs that are becoming more and more micro-influencers and using, digital platform as a way to connect. So we are seeing, the business transforming in that sense, which is to some extent exciting to see, and it's showing the resilience that we have in our footprint across all the businesses. But I want to go to an answer on a more deeper level, which I believe is the human aspect, right? People staying at home in lockdowns, etc. What we are seeing is people much more aware of the importance of taking care of themselves, taking care of their families. The notion of wellness and well-being is becoming much more prevalent. And that's why we see this opportunity coming out of this crisis of raising awareness about a world that is more sustainable. I think people are much more open to that because, again, they are really now paying attention to what's really important for them moving forward, right? Because this crisis has been so impactful. The other thing that I believe is a great lessons learned for humanity is, even though the virus does not discriminate, we know that it hits much harder the most vulnerable people. Right, and this inequality, it's not sustainable anymore, and we needed also as business leaders to do something about it, and we are committed to that. We heard about diversity and inclusion. We are putting a very bold growth of increasing by 30%, right, the participation of underprivileged and minorities in our workforce. We are going to be measuring progress of our network in terms of how we are increasing their access to healthcare, how they are, we are making their lives better from an education perspective. And I think it is responsibility also from the private sector, not just leaving that to governments, to really play their part in creating a more just society as well. So I think we needed to really think on those two aspects, a more business aspect, but also the role in a more, call it, sustainable way, in a holistic way, thinking about society, thinking about our roles to reduce inequality in the world.
And Roberto, I would say, I mean, Ilham will remember this from the General Assembly week, but when we last surveyed the CEOs of the Global Compact, I've done that survey now for 15 years, and every 3 years, so we've got a pretty good longitudinal data set on that. And I would say this year in particular, what you've just said about business leaders that I spoke to, at least, being much, much more on the front foot about having to step up and not leave inequality to governments, and to take responsibility themselves, whether or not that's things like living wages, whether or not that's tax, whether or not that's thinking about how to educate and reskill the future workforce to be able to cope with technology shifts and changes, really business taking a leadership role. Now, this time I'm not going to let you off by going last to have time to think. I'm going to reverse the order, so you're first this time, Roberto. And one of the things in SDG Ambition and the program the Compact has launched is about acceleration, quantification, setting benchmarks, given that a lot of the conversation is shifting from why to how, right? And that's really where benchmarks and practical insights and measurement helps. So how is establishing clear goals and sustainability benchmarks in these areas in your company, and how can they be accelerated to overcome some of the challenges and barriers businesses face? And the work that you've done a lot on is around recycling in places like Brazil and circular economy, setting very ambitious, bold targets. Tell us about that tackle some of those big barriers initially?
Yeah, no, very good question, Peter. Again, with this 2030, vision that we are launching today, which is, we are calling commitment to life, we are setting very specific goals in each one of those pillars. And I think we heard from the panel, very bold, very ambitious goals. And I think that's right. Even if we don't deliver all of them in the 10 years, some of them actually even shorter than 10 years, we have targets in terms of living wage that you mentioned, that we want to have everybody in our organization living wage by 2023. Right, so we are going to measure and track those things on a regular basis, and it is important also that we bring other companies, other benchmarks in terms of are we setting those goals appropriately, and we're also going to be humble enough to, if we needed to reset targets to even be more aggressive in some of them down the road, we absolutely will do it. So our commitment is to make sure that we are partnering with, again, civil society, governments, academia, the scientific community, NGOs, right? Really a call to all of them to come together here. We're not going to solve this issue as individual leaders or individual companies. So places like the UN Compact are perfect, setting and environment for companies to come together and work those topics. So I would say setting very ambitious, bold goals, being held accountable against them, delivering against those in metrics and paying, per performance, including them in payment for our executives and managers, which, we also heard and we concurred with that, but also making sure that we're revisiting those targets as we go and make sure that we're always setting the bar higher.
So moving on to you, Ilham, I think Roberto's given us some good examples. We talked in the last round about business models. You have a target at Solvay to generate 50% of revenues with solutions that address sustainable development. It doesn't get much more core to the business model than that. So how has that target helped you to mobilize and have clarity amongst leadership and teams?
So, yeah, as you said, Peter, we have Solvay One Planet, which is our new 2030 sustainability plans with 10 goals, with hard goals on greenhouse gas emission, coal phase out, biodiversity, sustainable solution, circularity, etc. You name it, diversity and inclusion. But let me spend more time about the how and how we measure it, because I think you are asking a very critical question, because there is no harmonized or standard tool in doing that. Our own in-house tool is called the Sustainable Portfolio Management, which has been in use for more than 10 years. Very simply put, this methodology analyzes market signals and based on those provide us with a good overview on whether product, solution, and potential innovation projects, or even an M&A deal, will create long-term sustainable value. Because is it helping you in your trajectory? So the SPM takes care of the planet, the people, and the profit equation. The tool is considered best in class. It's made it to Harvard Business School, and I could witness personally early March, where I spent a full day with a teacher for a day, with 200 MBA students, smarter than me in Boston. I was impressed by their keen and deep interest in the challenges of our planet, coupled with future trend and profitability. So finally, it's important to address the product solution in terms of their impact on the full life cycle. Cradle to cradle for the scientists and to grave, and from the cost perspective as a total cost of ownership and not only the unit cost at the point of purchase. So that's why it comes back to education, the education of purchasers, of all participants in the value chain, the future buyers, our kids. This requires a change of mindset. It was said by consumers, politics, put in new policies, green procurements and Green Deal. So I think you're right, Peter and the panelists. It's key to have hard goals, financial measure targets, and track the progress towards achieving them. I think particularly as a listed company, our performance is followed closely by the financial community, by rating agencies. Our shareholders follow ESG progress. Our employees who want to work for a sustainable company or future millennials, and our customers and other key stakeholders. So leaders need to lead if they want to leave a legacy, a real sustainable one.
Thank you, Ilham. And good, very practical with tools as well. I mean, Manny, PVH has had a very committed and strong history of engaging around metrics and tools and really driving the issue of gender into the heart of the way you lead and manage. Now, that's another, we've talked about inclusion and diversity a few different times. I mean, how do you've obviously got strong performance and you can maybe cover that, but actually, do you still need to constantly set and push yourselves and think differently about gender balance, given that we are still a long way as societies off of what we want to be achieving and what we should be achieving on that set of issues?
Yes, that's a great point, Peter. And I think it's an area where PVH and the fashion apparel industry can be a leader in. If you think about our inclusion and diversity work, gender parity has been a real focus for us. I'll start out by saying within our supply chain and within our company, about 2/3 of our workforce are female. So that starts with a key component of trying to drive this forward. And it's for us being part of the UNGC's Target Gender Equality Initiative has been critical. We've just, to reinforce that, we've just signed on to be a patron of that. And we've made commitments across the board about our leadership. Today, 50% of our leadership are female. We define that as 50% of our workforce is female over the vice president's level. But we still have more work to do there. We need to break the glass ceiling. We need to get better representation within the boardroom. We have about a third of our board of directors are female, but we can do better there. And we need to do better when it comes to people of color and minorities, where we really need to do a better job, especially in the executive leadership ranks and when it comes to our board. We recognize that, and we need to recognize that we need to be a key part of that as we go forward. And I guess I would just say is when you think about your business and who your key stakeholders are that have a requirement, this is becoming a requirement. It's becoming a requirement with our associates around the world. They want to work for a company that really is standing up for these issues of inclusion and diversity, both gender and race. They want to work for a company that's doing the right things when it comes to the environment. And then another key group is our consumers. Our consumers are clearly looking to do more research, understand our brands better, understand where we stand on these issues. Is it just talk, or are we actually delivering against solid targets that we're trying to deliver against each day as we move forward? So that's how we think about it, and that's how I think our consumers and our associates, and I think that's the best business case for us as we go forward.
Thank you, Manny. So we've got one more round of questions before I wanted to ask you guys to kind of deliver your sort of final thoughts. But rather than me just going with what I'd prepared, I want to open it up a little bit to some of the other feedback that's coming in as well. And you can choose. So I'm going to give each of you about 30 seconds to a minute. You choose whichever issue you'd like to cover. The issues that we were going to cover were very much around what role technology can play increasingly. And you talked about some of the items, for example, Ilham, that you had embedded into the way you think about decision-making frameworks, and you've all talked about transparency and traceability and how we measure and manage. So that's one topic you're welcome to cover. I think another topic that's coming up in the chat room is that even before COVID, we had this set of challenges that are really enormous. And, they're quite daunting in some respects. If you look at the environmental and social sets of issues that we need to deliver to 2030, and the UN Secretary General, pointed out in Davos that we're on track to only meet half. We need to make like this story. And that's a level of talk, and that's something that encourages you to take up even roles and responsibilities in integrating this strategy and into your direction. And the final question is, separate out the winners and the losers based on their real performance, those who are really driving progress and it can be verified and quantified, and make sure that we separate out those who are serious from those who are not. So I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute each. So we'll start with Ilham.
Peter, so I didn't get the second team, sorry. So you were talking about technology, the green washing, right? And the second one was?
The challenge, the sheer scale challenge, even before COVID, and how you manage that to 2030, and whether or not it encouraged you to step up given the SDG ambition and the SDG scale of challenge that we face as businesses.
Oh yeah. So I think, I mean, as I said, you know, we've been and we are, you know, following and practicing the SDGs in our Solvay One Planet. This is our overall ambitious plan for 2030. And it's a compass around what to do on the climate, on the resources, on better life within our walls, with our people, but outside with the communities. And I think, you know, I truly believe that to move away from greenwashing again and having a showroom of reports, it has to be embedded in the strategies, the business strategies. The business people have to have a target on sustainable solution as part of the group sales or EBITDA generation. They need to target circular economy and the sales based on renewable or recycled resources. We cannot do it alone. You need to do it with your supplier and with your customers. Industrial weight is important in my sector, right? The landfill, the incinerations, the water use efficiency. The water is scarce around the world, right? How to save it. And then, you know, the inclusion and diversity and the gender equality, we talked about it. We talked actually too much about it. I think we need now to ensure that we have targets and we prepare the pipeline. And when you have diversity in the room, you need to listen to it, because often it actually leaves companies because nobody is listening to it, right? And I think that's important in the future. So for me, I think people need to be extremely public about their ambitions. It has to hit the pockets like we do at our company. It is my pocket as a CEO, the pool of bonuses for the company, the short term, the long term incentives, and you know, all employees. And last but not the least, as a citizen of the world and leaders, it also goes into the education system. I truly believe, you know, the SDGs have to be taught at school with our kids to live their fully life on a healed planet. And I think education is extremely key. And the money which is being put into the economy to rescue it today actually is not a loan from the European Central Bank or US Federal Reserve. They are actually loans from our children's future liquidities. So we need to also fund towards more education, sustainability and inclusion, which rehabilitates the planet's health and resources for our kids and their grandkids.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Roberto and Manny, and then we'll let you final say as well, which will touch more on the government side. But the issues of tech and raising the ambition and anything you'd want to add, Roberto?
Yeah, so, you know, I would go back to, I think, leadership, Peter. I do think that it's time for leaders to step up. I mean, it's great to see people like Paul, for example, you know, moving from private sector to really dedicating himself into that, and we'd like to see more of that. I think it is also important as we think about the market for shareholders and investors and funds to be more aware of that and to demand companies also not only to deliver EBITDA growth or EPS growth, but how we're doing against those metrics that we're talking about, SDGs, etc. So I wanted this to be more front and center of the conversations with the investor communities. You know, it's easy just to ask companies to how you're improving your EPS, your EBITDA number. I wanted to have in the same conversations how we're doing against our target to really become net zero in 20 years, how we're doing in terms of inclusion, how we're doing about circularity of our packaging. So there is, again, the important thing of all stakeholders coming together and really understanding the importance of what you're going to try to do. Because, again, we cannot do it all alone. And I go back again, the importance of leaders in all aspects, government, society, academia, NGOs, scientific community. Important for leaders to listen to science, right? I mean, the crisis that we are going through. I mean, I just wish that a lot of other leaders would listen to science, right? And the climate crisis is a science-based crisis. It's not an opinion. And therefore, I think that the role of leaders in private sector, in government, in other aspects are so critical. And I think if we really comes together with dialogue and understanding of the importance of this, we're actually going to be making much more inroads toward what we would like to have as a more sustainable world over the next 10 years.
Very good. Thank you, Roberto. And over to you, Manny.
I think we touched on it. I think transparency and accountability are going to be key in order for us to deliver as we go forward in these areas of sustainability and diversity and inclusion. Connecting with our consumers on these things, communicating, making that part of the entire business strategy and making it part of how we develop our business plans, I think is going to be critical. By doing that and having that communication, we'll be connecting with our consumers. And I think that's the best business case we can have to really align our goals, that we're not just measured by our bottom line. We need to be measured by more than our bottom line or our balance sheet.
That's a great finishing point on this section, Manny. Thank you. I'm told that we're running quite finely. We've not gone over our time because I think we started a bit late, but we're going to have to ask for a final round, but very short, being a responsible moderator. When we sat with the UN Secretary General in Davos, he was very clear he wanted business leaders to step up and be heard in their call to action to governments as well, being explicit about the hard and the soft policies, regulations, support that they need in order to go to scale at speed. 30 seconds each on what you're asking of governments and what's important to you. Let's reverse the order. Manny.
Well, I think that's a great point. I think at PVH, I sit on the President's Council on Trade, which covers a myriad of issues that deal with sustainability and that also deal with fairness in trade, and trying to get that point across, even when there's significant differences of opinions, to try to make the voices be heard. I think with this void of leadership that's coming from governments around the world, I think it's more and more important for business to take a leadership role on that, make it understandable. And the fact that it's coming from business, I think it's just much more hard-hitting than if it was just general opinions.
Thank you, Manny. Roberto.
So two things. One, regarding Amazon, that is very dear to us. We are going to really fight and defend all legislations and encourage governments to do the same, that protects the forest and avoid any further deforestation. And in fact, we want to actually regenerate, if all possible, with some that's already being devastated. So that's one aspect that we are committed, and we're not going to rest until we have zero deforestation in the Amazon. The second was, in a global base, I would say, to continue to defend, human rights in supply chain, and not tolerate anything that would actually compromise or violate the basic principles of human rights.
Thank you, Roberto. The Amazon's so critical to all of us. And let me finish last, but by absolutely no means least, Ilham, if you could land the plane for us, that would be lovely.
Well, thank you, Peter. Well, listen, I think this crisis, we call it a crisis of lifetime, as daunting as it is today, can be a hit or a miss. I have been wired as an optimist and humanist. I believe in science, and science will bring solutions. And I believe this is not a crisis of lifetime, but rather an opportunity of a lifetime. And if we do it right and we are smart together, humanity shall emerge stronger from this, allowing our kids to live their lives fully on a healed planet. And the money I said we are borrowing from our children, like the earth we are borrowing from them, need to be well spent in sustainable industries. And I will finish, I would like to make a call today to the UN actually, to have its own global sort of SDGs Green Deal, because we citizens of the world, business, industrial leaders, cannot cope with the imbalance of the many local and national approaches to environmental issues, also the rising inequalities and vulnerability amongst countries and people. So this is not only about the climate, but it's also about resources and better lives. Thank you.
The crisis of a lifetime can present the opportunity of a lifetime. I think that's a great way to phrase it, Ilham. Thank you very much. On behalf of Accenture, on behalf of the UN Global Compact and SAP and all the partners involved in SDG Ambition, thank you very much indeed to all the panelists, to Ilham, to Roberto, to Manny, and also to Paul. Look forward to the second panel tomorrow. And with that, let me hand back to Femi and the Global Compact team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a favorite from that panel, a favorite line. It's from Roberto. We cannot run a business on a dead planet. That is a mic drop moment. Thank you for that, Roberto. We continue our program today with His Excellency Iván Duque Marques. He is the President of Colombia. Welcome, Mr. President.
Le envío un gran saludo a toda la organización de este evento de Líderes 2020. Estamos ante un año que nos trae grandes exigencias. El mundo enfrenta una pandemia que trae repercusiones económicas y en el empleo sin precedentes. Tal vez sea este el momento más duro que enfrenta la humanidad desde la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Por eso, las voces de liderazgo son tan importantes. Por eso actuar con coherencia, con congruencia, con un sentido de competencia, buscando atender a los más vulnerables y sobre todo con cariño genuino por las personas que se ven más afectadas, es un deber moral. Sabemos además que salir adelante en medio de esta pandemia requiere muchas decisiones, decisiones duras, con efectos sociales, pero la voz del liderazgo está centrada en la pedagogía, en poder orientar a nuestros países para que no nos vayamos por el camino de la demagogia o del populismo, que entendamos que el verdadero camino requiere de nosotros proteger la vida, proteger la salud, proteger el empleo, recuperar nuestras economías, promover una pedagogía de disciplina individual y colectiva y sobre todo aprovechar este tiempo no para volver a la normalidad, sino para ser mejores, para mirar con entusiasmo el futuro, para darnos cuenta que la protección del medio ambiente es un deber, para darnos cuenta que el aire puro, que la protección de los ecosistemas es un deber de todos, y para valorar a aquellos que son héroes, anónimos muchas veces, que son los que garantizan el abastecimiento de alimentos y de medicamentos para que estén cerca de nuestras casas. El compromiso de los líderes en el 2020 es que pensemos en salir de esta tormenta mejores, resilientes, capaces, y que seamos también una generación que mira hacia el futuro, acelerando la virtualidad, haciendo de la conciencia ambiental un ícono para siempre. Hoy valoramos más que nunca este espacio que fue fundado por Kofi Annan, un secretario general formado al interior de la organización, que representó la carrera al interior de la organización y que llevó siempre su gran sentido humanista a distintas regiones del mundo. Por eso les deseo lo mejor en este encuentro de liderazgo y aprovecho para agradecerle a la directora ejecutiva del Pacto Global, Lacy, por su liderazgo en conectar los 17 objetivos de la Agenda 2030 con los lineamientos del Pacto Global. También le envío mis mejores deseos a Sando Jambo, la nueva directora ejecutiva. Sus mejores éxitos estarán respaldados por nosotros. Sabemos que usted tiene el liderazgo y la vamos a acompañar. Colombia, hoy más que nunca, está comprometida con cumplir los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y de avanzar en medio de esta pandemia, pero con un sentido de no desfallecer ni un solo minuto en lograr esa gran hoja de ruta para que la protección del ambiente, el desarrollo del empleo, el empoderamiento de la mujer, atender a los más vulnerables sea una realidad global. Muchísimas, muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Mr. President. This would be a very good time for me to tell you that on our platform, on our conference platform, we have multiple languages available to you. Just search around, you'll find the button, and then you'll be able to listen to it in multiple languages, all the languages that the UN uses usually. And now I'm going to hand over the program to Lisa Kingo, who is the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact. Lisa, I'm handing back to you.